Still
We're
got
on.
to play.
They play a lot.
All right.
Or did the end.
Everybody
Still
ready?
got to play a lot.
I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a 10:29 special meeting for, to consider additional appropriations. I will call, we are continuing to conduct this meeting and the meeting after in accordance with the governor's executive order and the public health emergency. So this meeting is being held virtually. We'll call the roll. Mrs. Ave.
Present.
Mrs. Corrado.
Present.
Mr. Cool.
Here.
Dr. Hawkins.
Present.
Mrs. Hill. Mr. West.
Present.
And Chair Marks present. We have a quorum. Please stand and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we will move on to Mr. Chapman's comment and overall overview of the project and what we're trying to accomplish with this additional financing in 1028 hearing. Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, Mr. Ream. Members of the board, as you may recall, last spring we had a pretty significant hailstorm in our community that created quite a bit of damage. A number of our buildings suffered roof damage, and in particular the middle school. Throughout the past year, we've been working with the insurance adjusters to determine the extent of the coverage for the damages. And at the same time, we've gone through the roof repair replacement proposal process and did receive 4, all of which were significantly higher than the insurance plan provided by the insurance carrier. This was due in part to many years of issues, including seam issues and leaks with the roof that needed to be addressed. In short, it was necessary to secure an additional $1.245 million to assure the quality repair and replacement of the middle school roof so that it lasts for years to come. Tonight, you are being asked to approve 2 resolutions which will allow us to complete the work at the middle school. With us tonight is Jeff Falkenbush, Bond Counsel, and Jason Tansel, Financial Advisor, to provide funding details prior to the opening up of the meeting for public input. I'd like to turn it over to Jason and Jeff at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Superintendent Chapman. And I just, Jeff had something is happening with Jeff's technology. He wasn't able to hear, so I think he is trying to reconnect. But I will be happy to go over the number aspect of it. But before I do that, I just want to make sure everybody can hear me. I just want to make sure, since this is all virtual, give me a thumbs up. Okay, great, thank you. As Superintendent Chapman mentioned, my name is Jason Tansel with Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, and we serve as a school corporation's municipal advisor, and we have been doing so since 2015. And tonight, my role here is to explain the financial impact of the school corporation potentially entering into a bond issuance to assist with this roofing project. And I guess before I go on, I see Jeff has reconnected. Can you hear us now, Jeff?
I can't, I can hear you,
Okay.
sorry about that, I was having a little technical difficulties there, so.
That's okay. I'm going to go over the numbers, and then you can you'll go over the legal aspect of it. So
That'd be great.
Keep on going. So, does everybody have the presentation that was okay? Great. So I'm going to speak to the 8-slide presentation that is in your board packets or on the computer screen. I'm going to go to slide 2. Slide 2 gives a snapshot of where South Vermillion Schools currently is as far as the outstanding bonds currently for the school corporation. As you can see, there are 8 bonds outstanding, with 4 of those being repaid by 2021. So we do have 4 bonds that are coming to term here next year or so. I want to point your attention though to the far right column that has the total. Each individual bond has annual payments, but on the far right, you can see all of the school corporation's annual payments see that in total, in 2019 through 2024, annual payments are about $1.7 million. Payments do decrease in 2025, with all debt being repaid by 2028. I just wanted to spend a little bit of time on this slide because more or less there is a direct relationship with increasing or decreasing annual payments is a driver of the tax rate. And so you can see here that we do have level payments until 2025. Slide 3 is the graph of the same numbers that you just seen on slide 2. It's a visual, I'm more of a visual person, and I think it really illustrates the point of each bond is represented by its own unique color. I know I can only put on so many different variations of blue, gray, or green, the colors that I'm limited to, but you can see each bond is represented by an individual color, and that when stacked upon each other, those annual payments are at about that $1.7 million level, again with a drop in 2025, and all debt being repaid by 2028. Slide 4 is the school corporation's current general obligation bonding capacity. In the resolutions in front of you tonight, the bond instrument being discussed here is a general obligation bond. And general obligation bonds have a limitation that we must stay under, and that limitation is 2% of 1/3 of your most recent net assessed value. So you can see here that in 2020, the certified net assessed value for South Vermillion was approximately $420 million, and that after also taking into account any other general obligation debt of the school corporation, so taking into account the 2015 ABCs as well as the 2018 general obligation bonds, that the capacity available to the school is $1,249,000. The borrowing being discussed here is $1,245,000, so we are right under that limitation. And I do want to point out here that this is after the school corporation makes its July 15, 2020 payments. Slide 5 gives a summary of the financial characteristics of the proposed bond. Again, you can see here that we're talking about a $1,245,000 borrowing with an estimated repayment term of 8 years, 5 months. And that 8 years, 5 months matches the maturity of all of the existing debt of South Vermillion. So not extending payments beyond 2028. We have an estimated interest expense of $208,000. And with this, we are projecting a 5.01 debt service tax rate increase. A little note about the interest expense is that we are conservative by nature, and so we are assuming current market indicators plus 1%. But market has been interest rates have been very low as of recently, but of course, the market has also been slightly volatile just given all the uncertainty with COVID-19. Slide 6 is a visual of the bond structure that we are proposing, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this graph. In the blue bars, you can see the annual payments that were discussed on slides 2 and 3. So those are the total annual payments of $1.7 million, and with the drop in 2025. The green bars are the proposed bond repayment structure of the $1,245,000 borrowing. And again, you can see here that those would be projected to hit the tax goals in 2021, and that the bond would be repaid by 2028 to match the already existing term of the school corporation's other existing bonds. You can see here that we are projecting 2021 increase in payments there in that green bar, and that we are then minimizing the payments in 22, 23, 24 to try to minimize the impact to the school corporation and its taxpayers. But because of laws that were changed in 2014, the actual 5-cent tax rate impact that we are projecting is going to occur in 2022 instead of 2021. And the reason for that is that the school corporation has entered into bonds after July 1, 2014, and a law was enacted in 2014 to where school corporations are no longer able to carry 50% of annual payments, but rather 15%. And so the school corporation in 2021 is a spin down of its operating reserves in the debt service fund. So I just wanted to point out that even though the increase in payment looks as though it's occurring in 2021, it is. We are projecting to be steady tax rate and be level in 2021, and that the real 5 cent increase actually occurs in 2022. So what does this mean to your taxpayers? We have this summarized on slide 7 with our estimated annual taxpayer impact. What does a 5 cent tax rate impact mean? Here on the far left, we've broken this down into 3 categories. We have homesteads listed first. We have agricultural land second, and then commercial property third there at the bottom. And we have a range here of estimated market values of property, and important to note that taxpayers usually have many deductions and exemptions available to them, and that we assume that the standard deduction, supplemental homestead deduction are taken, as well as the mortgage credit. And then once we factor those in, you can see the assessed value of which the taxpayer actually will pay the extra 5 cents. So I will just, I know there are a lot of numbers on this slide, but I will draw your attention to the 76,600 home value there at the top. That is the median home value per the U.S. Census Bureau within South Vermillion schools, and that the taxpayer on an annual basis would pay approximately $8.80, or on a monthly basis, if you're having an escrow, the increase would be 73 cents a month. So the increase to the median home value is $8.79. On a monthly basis, that is 73 cents. We do have factors for agricultural land there. We have 1 acre of agricultural land and 100 acres of agricultural land. We do use the Department of Local Government Finances numbers for the 1 acre assessed valuation of farmland, and that is $1,280. And you can see there that on 1 acre of land, that is a 64-cent increase, but with with a multiplying factor of 100 acres per se, that would be a $64.13 increase. With that, I know there's a lot of numbers here in the presentation, but I would be happy to answer any questions that the board would have, or I'd be happy to turn it over to Superintendent Chapman or Jeff.
If there are no questions from the board, I'll turn it over to Jeff to explain the resolutions at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, Mr. President, members of the board. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. Sorry for the little technical glitch I had there at the beginning of the public hearing before being patient with me. So tonight, we have published this notice on June 3rd to be a public hearing, and I know that there was a notice also posted on our website that talked about if there were any comments from the community. They can either show up at the boardroom there and provide those, or they can submit those via the Zoom chat room to the superintendent prior to the meeting, and so we want to have that here in a minute. The 2 resolutions that are going to be presented during the action items after the public hearing would be what is known as the 1028 reimbursement bond resolution, which is the larger of the 2 resolutions that contains all the terms and conditions for the repayment of the bonds that Jason has covered there, as well as some other things regarding the maximum discount that's allowed for the bonds to be sold and those sorts of things. The second resolution that is in your board packet is an appropriation resolution. Just like all expenditures from the school corporation have to be subject to an appropriation, you do those in your budget. You don't include bond proceeds and bond issues in your budget because those aren't done on a regular basis. Those are done just as needed, such as the case we have here. And so the process is that we have this public hearing this evening, and then after that public hearing, you would then consider the resolution that would then approve the appropriation in the amount of the bond proceeds plus interest earnings. So the amount of appropriation that we have in that resolution is more than the principal amount of the bonds, take into account any interest earnings and other revenues that may become available for the project as a result of the bond issue. So that's why it's $1,700,000 in that appropriation. If you approve the 2 resolutions this evening, then we would publish a notice of determination to issue the bonds in the local paper there at the end of June and beginning of July. We would then also then publish a notice of sale. These bonds will be subject to a public sale where we would then on a certain date receive bids from interested buyers and award the bonds to the lowest bidder, i.e. the bidder that provides the lowest interest cost to the school corporation during the term of the financing. We anticipate that we would sell the bonds sometime in the middle of August, early middle of August, and then we would close right before Labor Day, and that would then provide you with revenues together with what you're going to receive from insurance proceeds to hopefully fix all the roof damage that you would incur as a result of the hail that came through about a year or so ago. So I'd be happy to answer any questions about the resolutions or the process, but then once we get finished with that, you should then see if there's anyone there in the boardroom that wishes to provide public comment, or if there isn't any, Mr. Chapman has received any comments via email from anyone he wishes to read at this time.
Right now, there's still no commentary from anyone via social media, Zoom or YouTube. I don't believe that there's anybody in the boardroom.
There is not.
Those members who are in there can verify that for us.
There is not.
All right. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions of the board, but you can then close the public hearing and move into your regular action items if you so desire.
I would, absent any comments, I would recommend a motion. This does require a motion, second, and board and vote action, so.
So move.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to close the 1028 public hearing. Now roll call vote. All members in favor, well, not all members in favor. Mrs. Ave. Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Corrado.
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado's a yay. Mr. Cool.
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins.
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill. Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West.
Yay.
Mr. West's a yay. The chair is a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, next item is recommendation to adopt the 1028 bond reimbursement resolution.
So moved.
I have a motion to,
Second.
is that you, Mrs. Ave?
Yes.
All right, seconded by Mrs. Ave. Roll call vote. All in favor, or roll call vote, boy, these virtual meetings. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Yay. Mrs. Corrado? Mrs. Corrado's a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay, and show the chair is yay. Motion passes 7-0. And next item is to recommendation to approve the additional appropriation resolution.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the additional appropriation resolution. Roll call vote. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Mrs. Ave's yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado's a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill?
Yay.
Is it Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair is a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Unless there's anybody that would want to comment now, I'd suggest board members will handle board comment in the regular meeting immediately following. Unless there's anybody that would like to make a comment about this process or the 1028 hearing. Anybody online? Otherwise, I'd recommend a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion. Yeah.
Motion by Mr. Cool, second by Dr. Hawkins. Roll call vote to adjourn. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins, yay. Mrs. Hill?
Yay.
Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West, a yay. Show the chair as a yay. We stand adjourned. And give us just a moment, and we will gavel in the regular meeting for the month of June 2020.
Jason, Jeff, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Stay safe.
I can't get used to getting my Clintonian early. I still go out in the evening and look for it on the boards.
All right. Everybody ready?
Ready, Kenny?
All right. So I'd like to call this meeting to order, which is our regular meeting for the month of June 2020. First item we will do is roll call. Mrs. Ave,
Yeah, yeah.
present. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Mrs. Corrado.
Yeah.
Mr. Corrado's present. Mr. Cool.
Here.
Mr. Cool's present. Dr. Hawkins.
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is present. Mrs. Hill.
Present.
Mrs. Hill's present. Mr. West.
Yay.
Mr. West is present, and show the chair is present, so we have a quorum. First item is recommendation to approve the agenda. We did have one minor change in personnel report under classified staff. Mr. Chapman will cover it when we get there, but I do recommend that you add that to tonight's agenda. So I would recommend you approve the agenda as amended.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Motion was made by Mr. West, seconded by Mr. Cool, by the way. You got beat. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave.
Yay.
Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Corrado.
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado is a yay. Mr. Cool.
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins.
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill.
Yay.
Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West.
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair is yay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on, minutes of the moving on to the consideration of the minutes of the regular board meeting held on May 18th, 2020, and the executive session held on June the 4th, 2020.
I'd move both sets of those minutes be approved.
Dr. Hawkins moves for approval.
Second.
Mr. Cool seconds. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Mrs. Ave's a yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado's a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay, and show the chair as a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Moving on to finance for the month of June.
I move we accept vouchers 101-274 through 101-414 as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We'll get together. I have a motion by Mr. West, seconded by Mrs. Hill, to approve vouchers 101-274 through 101-414. Roll call vote on the motion. Mrs. Ave? Mrs. Ave is yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado's yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool's yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair as a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to June's personnel reports. Mr. Chapman.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. Members of the board, the personnel report for June is typically the most lengthy as we recommend our ECA positions for the upcoming school year, and this year is no exception as we have, outside of regular items, we have 84 extracurricular recommendations for you. You have the entire list in your packet. However, I'd like to highlight the following items at this time. Under retirements and resignations of our certified head staff, Linda Avenatti, our high school guidance counselor, her retirement effective the end of the 2019-20 school year. She has served 28 years here at South Vermillion. Raven Rivera, elementary teacher, 4th grade at Ernie Pyle, her resignation to relocate effective the end of the 19-20 school year. Also under classified staff, you have Valerie Smith, elementary secretary at Ernie Pyle, and then effective May 20th, 2020. Under recommendation, certified staff, Booch, South Main Middle School, Covered Bridge Special Education District functional teacher. She's replacing Carol Baldry. She will be employed and paid through Covered Bridge Special Education District. Kayla Payton is moving from 1st grade to 4th grade to Ernie Pyle. That's a voluntary transfer. Amber Pitts, also a voluntary transfer from 1st grade at Van Dyne Elementary to the Corporation K-5 STEM teacher, effective next school year. And I apologize if I butcher this last name, Tenmi Bulligman, Central Elementary and Ernie Pyle Elementary music teacher for the next school year. Brianne Garber, South Vermillion High School Apex-based summer school teacher. Dana Franz, Jason Brewer, Carol Waldrop, elementary virtual summer school teachers. Gianna Joe and J.S. Sellers, virtual summer school teachers for the school. And classified staff to make note that Marion Adams has requested some voluntary transfer from South Vermillion High School guidance secretary to the Ernie Pyle Elementary secretary treasurer. Those go along with all the other multitude of extracurricular recommendations we ask for approval this evening.
Mr. Chapman, you want to point out that addendum?
The addendum, yeah, I knew I would forget that one.
Yeah.
Under ECA's number 24, please replace Andrew with David Basin as South Vermillion High School assistant volleyball coach.
Thank you. Dr. Hawkins has a question.
Mr. Chapman, I just have a couple of questions. In the Apex summer program, is there a student count there, or how's that working?
I don't know what the student count is right now. I do know that there are a number of students that are looking to get into that program as soon as possible. We have set up one of the high school teachers to run that program during the summer. He is, I believe it was John Lotz, being trained to do that, and once we're ready, we're up and running.
Are these students who
awaiting.
are these students who might have been in the regular school program during? Are these students who are in the regular year school program?
I'd have to get with Mr. Schimmel on that. That's outside, that's not the program that Brock is doing. This is just a basic credit recovery.
Okay.
Apex.
Okay, I got you. Thank you. And then the other question I had was Amber Pitts is transferred to K-5 STEM. Where will she actually work out of?
She'll work out of all three schools. Her schedule will be dictated on a certain number of days at each school.
Okay, so she's home based basically in all three elementaries?
Right.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Any other, yeah,
Yes, I have a quick comment or question.
yeah, Mrs. Levy.
I'm not questioning exactly the thinking, I just, where we're taking a functional instructional aid position at the middle school and reducing it by an hour.
That was at Mrs. Harris' request. pushing that hour to the library technology assistant. There wasn't the need because of the number of students going to be served this next year. Was one of the reasons why she pushed that.
So I just wondered if, in order to add the hour for the library, we needed to take an hour away?
That was her fault. That wasn't something that was requested of her to do.
Mr. Chapman, under the
Yes.
extracurricular with all the coaching, if some reason we would have to shut down and go back to our e-learning program, are we committing to paying all these positions?
That is something the board will need to decide prior to the start of the school year. That was, it was discussed, with the principals earlier in the summer because of the way the spring turned out. We'd already gone through the school year. And it was, from my perspective, we have to have this in place, knowing full well that our expectation is to begin school on time, in person, all that. However, if the board chooses to put in a resolution that states that if we, prior to the start of the school year, for example, if we're forced to shut down and there will be no sports, no activities like it was in the spring, you have that out. You have to do that by, I guess, semester or season if you want to do something like that, or just have a blanket resolution that states should we have to be forced to close school, all extracurricular stipends will be forfeited. That's a call by the board. I have not seen where any of the surrounding school corporations have gone that far yet. That's something that's been a point of discussion among area superintendents, not only locally but around the state. And to be perfectly honest with you, nobody's come out and said they're not going to pay.
Okay.
At least I haven't heard that from where the meetings I've been involved in.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion regarding the personnel report for June.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Mr. West, seconded by Mr. Cool, to approve the personnel report and the addendum as presented. Roll call vote. Mrs. Ave.
Yay.
Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Corrado.
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado is a yay. Mr. Cool.
Yay.
Mr. Cool is a yay. Dr. Hawkins.
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill.
Yay.
Mrs. Hill is a yay. Mr. West.
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair as a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item is a recommendation to approve resolution for the suspension of school board policies conflicting with waivers and extensions during the COVID-19 pandemic. I think, Mr. Chapman, you can explain this one.
Sure. Members of the board, part of the reentry process for all school corporations throughout the state, we have a certain number of things we need to cover. As we begin that process this fall, one very important aspect is the school board approval, a resolution for the suspension of school board policies conflicting with waivers and or extensions during the pandemic. At this time, I can read the proposed resolution, and not too lengthy, but one which has been provided for school corporations to present to the board from the PBS School Boards Association. And the resolution for suspension of school board policies conflicting with waivers or extensions during COVID-19 pandemic. Whereas on March 6, 2020, Governor Eric Holcomb issued Executive Order 20-2 declaring a state of public health disaster emergency due to COVID-19 and has extended the public health emergency through subsequent executive orders to July 4, 2020. And whereas on April 2nd, 2020, Governor Holcomb issued Executive Order 20-16, which closed all public schools throughout the state for the remainder of the 2019-2020 school year, which is defined as June 30th, 2020. And whereas on May 1, 2020, Governor Holcomb issued Executive Order 20-26, which provided for the reopening of entities in the state in 5 stages. This executive order provided details for stages 1 and 2. Executive Order 20-26 provided stage 5 will begin July 4th, 2020, and school grounds and buildings will then be open. Subsequently, Executive Order 20-28 issued on May 21st, 2020 provided the detail of stage 3, which will end on June 13th, which is this past weekend. These executive orders and others issued by the governor provide for various waivers and extensions for school-related statutes and regulations. And whereas on June 5th, 2020, the Indiana Department of Education issued Indiana's Consideration for Learning in Safe Schools, known as INCLAS, COVID-19 Health and Safety Reentry Guidance. INCLAS provides guidance concerning health and safety measures to be in place for the return to school for the 2020-2021 school year. INCLAS recommends that a school corporation develop a plan for returning to school in consultation with local and state health departments and pass a resolution to suspend policies and procedures in conflict with governmental waivers or extensions. And whereas additional waivers and extensions of existing state regulations and changes to state and federal laws may be announced during the pandemic, and whereas many South Vermillion Community School Corporation school board policies reflect requirements of state and federal laws and regulations that have already been waived or may be waived because of the pandemic, and where South and Community School Board's usual practice is to make changes to policy only after the proposed policy change is considered at 2 school board meetings. And whereas the South Vermillion Community School Corporation School Board needs to be able to adapt school corporation operations to rapid changes in law and regulation. And whereas enforcing the requirements of existing policies result in outcomes inconsistent with current laws and regulations as they exist after waivers or if extended. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the South Vermillion Community School Corporation School Board suspends such policies or provisions within policies which reflect legal and or regulatory requirements that have been waived or extended by Governor Holcomb, the Indiana Department of Education, or other state agencies which enacted these requirements. And now, therefore, be it further resolved that the suspension of policies or provisions within policies of the South Vermillion Community School Corporation School Board is in effect for the duration of time that the waiver of laws and or regulations reflected in these policies are waived. And now, therefore, be it further resolved that the superintendent is directed to inform the school board of any regulations that are suspended by the superintendent and the duration of such suspensions. And now, therefore, be it further resolved that the South Vermillion Community School Corporation Board will comply with temporary laws and regulations without enacting policies to implement those laws and regulations. And finally, now, therefore, be it resolved that the execution of this resolution is conclusive evidence of the South Vermillion Community School Corporation School Board's approval of this action. Adopted and approved on this 15th day of June 2020.
Okay, that'll keep all the attorneys happy anyway. You've heard the resolution. I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Dr. Hawkins, second by Mr. West, in favor of the resolution. Roll call vote. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Crowder?
Yay.
Mrs. Crowder is a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool is a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill is a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair is a yay, and the motion passes 7-0. Resolution is approved. Next item is recommendation to approve annual public official bonds for all the treasurers and principals from July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. We do this every year. It's just a routine renewal.
Members of the board, this is, like Mr. Regan said, this is an annual recommendation that's made and requested this time for matter of public record.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Mr. West, seconded by Mr. Cool. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave?
Yay?
Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado is a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool is a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill?
Yay.
Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Chair is a yay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item, recommendation to approve South Vermillion Community School Corporation's annual participation in the Title I program and High Ability program for the 2020-2021 school year. Mr. Chapman.
Again, this is an annual recommendation made at this time so that the corporation may continue to receive funding through these programs. We ask for your approval.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Mrs. Ave, seconded by Mrs. Corrado. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Mrs. Ave is yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado is a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool is a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill?
Yay.
Mrs. Hill is a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair voting yay. Motion passes 7-0. Next item, recommendation to approve donations. And certainly in these crazy times, we appreciate all the donations that the corporation receives. So, Mr. Chapman, you want to present those donations?
Members of the board, the approval is requested this evening for acceptance of donations to the schools as outlined in your board packet. Donations for Central Elementary totaling $681.40, Van Dyne Elementary totaling $259.60, South Vermillion High School $250, and South Vermillion Middle School $250, most of which came from Tri-Capital for the art show. Other items were face masks, hand sanitizer, plastic bags, loyalty program from Casey's. We are greatly indebted to our community partners for their continued support of our schools and our school programs, and we ask your approval this evening.
Make a motion, we accept them.
A motion by Mr. Cool,
Second.
seconded by Mr. West to accept the donations. Roll call vote in favor of the motion. Mrs. Ave?
Yay.
Mrs. Ave is a yay. Mrs. Corrado?
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado is a yay. Mr. Cool?
Yay.
Mr. Cool's a yay. Dr. Hawkins?
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins is a yay. Mrs. Hill? Mrs. Hill's a yay. Mr. West?
Yay.
Mr. West is a yay. Show the chair voting yay. Motion passes 7-0. Okay, here we have concluded our regular business. Here again during the public health emergency in accordance with Governor Holcomb's order, we are keeping agenda items to a minimum and only necessary business. So much an abbreviated meeting yet again this evening. We will conclude with first superintendent comment and then board member comment as usual. Mr. Chapman?
Thank you, Mr. Reed. A couple items I'd like to bring to the board's attention. We have begun the process of our school reentry program. The plan is starting to take form. We are looking at the very good possibility of returning to school in person. Our school board approved date of August 10th, if all goes well. That being said, we know that what we say today may not be true tomorrow because we don't know where we're heading with this pandemic. Obviously, we hope we're on the downslide, but we're seeing signs of spikes across the nation. We just hope it doesn't in our area. I want you to be aware that the task force that is working on this is about 28 to 30 people strong, representing all stakeholders. All aspects of our schools are being reviewed, from general procedures, detailed protocols, and labeled responsive to 3 areas. 1, little to no virus-related spread. 2, minimal spread. And 3, significant spread. So we're looking at every avenue as far as coming to school in a traditional fashion, all the way to closing school down if necessary. Areas being reviewed obviously are instructional practices, operations, health services, resources, athletics and extracurriculars, communications, and there's a lot of different subcategories in those 6 areas. A more in-depth look and review will be prepared in the coming weeks as we work to put our reentry plan together. We are working hand in hand with Dr. Albright and the Vermillion County Health Department. Wendy Farley has been our contact person with the health department, and we feel very good about the partnership there. They've been very responsive to our questions, and we think we have a very good relationship moving forward with them. We'll be fully transparent on both sides, so we feel good about that. Outside of that has taken up the bulk of our time this summer, but we still have some staffing issues to deal with. So we're still underway looking for a high school counselor. We have a couple of elementary teaching positions open and support staff that we're working on. Hopefully by the July board meeting, we'll have those recommendations for you as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. All right, we'll conclude with board member comment, and let's start with folks that have joined us over Zoom. So, Mrs. Ave.
Oh, I think maybe the only thing I'd like to comment about is I think we've done a good job so far on the hires. I particularly want to point out Erica, the new middle school special needs teacher, and Demi B, that's what I'll call her, for the music teacher, for the elementary music teacher, look like really good additions to our corporation. I noticed that Erica is able to teach or to work with swimming, and I see that we don't have a swimming coach yet, so that might be a possibility there. But just good job for the hires, and look forward to reading more in July about them. That's it.
Thank you, Mrs. Ave. Mrs. Hill.
Just gonna echo Bonnie's comments, but Dave, do we have to approve the athletics when because aren't they allowed to go back and start practicing in July? Do we have to approve that before that's able to happen?
Once their official practice season begins, they're good to go, but they haven't. Early on, we were under the impression that the board would have to approve when and how they could come back to school athletics. The in-class plan from the DOE did that for us. They gave us specific guidelines as to when they could come back and to what extent they could come back. For example, student athletes during the first phase, which is from June 6th to, I think, for 2 weeks, they're only allowed 15 hours per week. And they have to be in small groups. And that's not 15 hours per week per sport. If Johnny is in football and is in basketball, that doesn't mean 15 hours he can commit to football and 15 hours he can commit to basketball. That means 15 hours total that week. So the coaches we had a meeting last week with all the coaches, and we explained this process to them. So they have to be aware and work together as a coaching staff to make sure that those protocols or those procedures aren't violated. The thing that I expressed to the coaches and to Tim Terry, our athletic director, is if there's a student athlete who is involved in multiple sports, precedence needs to take place for the fall sports. That's most pressing right now. So that's where we're at from there. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that if we needed to meet again before they actually came back in July, that
if something changes from the DOE, I think that might be necessary, but at this point in time, when that came out, there's a lot of discussion among superintendents and athletic directors, and that is the guidance that was agreed upon between the Department of Education, the IHSAA, and the State Department of Health. So, and from all the conversations that I had with other superintendents leading up to this, before we got that document, most superintendents that were in our discussion groups were saying they didn't start until July 6th either. So that kind of helped that 1 week issue. That's where we were going to have, if that can come through, we were going to have a discussion about that. Because the IHSA, when they originally said July 1, it was in conflict with the governor's stage 5 date of July 4th. So that was going to be where the rub was potentially going to be. What were we going to do July 1st through July 5th, and what the details of that time frame would be, what we could allow, what we couldn't allow. Those folks in those departments did that for us.
You got your work cut out for you.
Can I just,
It's okay.
Dr. Hawkins has
Oh,
thank you, Ms. Sell.
I-
Dr. Hawkins has a follow-up.
yeah, I just want to follow up on that, Dave. So there's no board action required until the season officially opens? The season officially opens?
No, if the board wants to, and we can do this if it's the board's pleasure, we have a resolution to adopt what was presented in the reentry guidance document from the DOE. Most folks don't feel that that's necessary because it came from the 3 entities that most closely are associated with what needs to be done, and so we just follow that plan. But again, I don't know of too many school districts that I've talked with, any superintendents that are looking at it other than following that plan.
So, yeah, I think if you would require board action would be if you want to do something more restrictive, because the guidance does let you do that, but as opposed to the rest of the DOE guidance, the athletic section is pretty prescriptive.
Yeah.
So likely not, but.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins.
What you have to be careful of is the kids don't stay in there, until they get done with it, stay an hour, hour and a half, goof around in a gymnasium.
Well, it will have, it can't certainly be organized, and we'll have to administrate that, of course. Yep. Good point. Mrs. Corrado?
I'd like to thank everybody for all their hard work, all the committees, administrators, the teachers, parents, everyone. Looking forward to our July meeting, getting more information about graduation. And, Dave, I can stop in sometime tomorrow to sign those resolutions, if that works.
That would be perfect.
That's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Corrado. Mr. West?
I likewise want to thank everyone for all the hard work. I've been representing the board on the reentry committee of those 26 to 30 people. And I can tell you right now, everybody's working pretty hard. They're taking it serious. And I think they'll have a good plan put together for us come the end of June. I'm hoping that at some point, we're going to have a resolution where we reset all these resolutions that we've changed in the last, 2 or 3 months. We've got a lot of stuff out there pending, and I hope at some point we get a general resolution that we say we're back to normal. So,
Amen.
So that would be great. So, thank you.
I second that.
Well said. Well said. Dr. Hawkins?
Well, I just want to echo everyone else's comments about thanks for the planning. And I want to also shout out to Linda Abnetti after her many years with the corporation, and I'm sure she's looking forward to it. I did email her and told her to kind of go light on those honeydew lists for Pete because they get pretty big as you go on there.
Yep.
And then I also want to say that I don't wanna use the term amazes me, but I'm always very interested every year to see the number of people who step up and step in when you've got all these ECA positions to cover. I mean, it's just, it's kinda heartening to see people, do that. It's a lot of stuff to cover.
Sure it is.
For people to step up every year. For example, I'm very happy to see Mrs. Roberts re-engage with the theater program and many others too. So I want to say good job with that, and I appreciate all those folks, appreciate your hard work.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. Mr. Cool.
I'm like Mr. Hawkins, like to congratulate everybody that signed up and do extra work this year, coaching, being staff sponsors, and stuff like that. And wish them all the very best. And it's been a pretty good year. I mean, for what's going on. I mean, we've handled it pretty good.
I think you're
I
right.
don't think we're in a lot of trouble like some schools may be in, but we're doing good, and you just gotta keep up the extra work and hope nobody gets sick, and wish our teachers the best, and the kids.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
One more.
Yes, sir. Mr.
Could
West.
I'd like to make a shout out to the New Daily Clintonian and the effort you folks are putting in to keep the folks in this community aware of what's going on. I know it's a lot of work, but I think it's well appreciated by the community, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. And Mr. West. In conclude, a few thoughts in conclusion. Number one, we do enter, as it's currently contemplated anyway, we do enter stage 5 of the governor's reentry on July the 4th. I believe the governor's executive order for the public health emergency is supposed to lift at the same time, at least as currently contemplated. So we'll have to think about that and review that as it gets closer in content as it relates to holding our July 20th, 2020 meeting, which is our next regularly scheduled meeting. If the governor's order is lifted, that means the order allowing virtual meetings it goes with it. So we'll have to look at that and see if it's extended, but right now looks like it's going to expire on July 4th. So we'll keep everybody informed. Obviously, as I understand it, after July 4th, social distancing is still to stay in place. So it makes meeting here in the boardroom at the superintendent's office a little problematic if members of the community want to attend. So we've discussed possibly the high school auditorium, but no final determination's been made yet. But we will keep the public informed as it gets closer to that date, what our plans are as far as a meeting in July. The other thing is, and I think Mr. West, you alluded to it, while we don't have to approve the athletic plan, we do have to board approve the committee's task force plan for whatever reentry plan you do end up bringing forward to this board for its consideration. Depending on when the task force concludes,
And I think the target is June 30th. Dave, is that still the target, June 30th? Is that,
no pressure.
No pressure at all, right? I would say we would like to have that. It may be delayed slightly. It just depends on what kind of information we get between now and then. We're meeting this Wednesday. We're gonna start putting some pieces together that the subcommittees have been tasked with, and it may be one of those things where we meet more than just once a week, but I think we've got a pretty good idea of the direction and how we want to do that. There's just some pieces of that puzzle that need to be worked out, because what we don't want to have is parents and students fearful of coming to school, staff members being fearful of coming to school. We want to make sure all safety and health protocols are in place, and we can assure our community as much as possible that school is a safe place to be, and we've got all the those surveys, and we're getting a good feel from staff and parents, how they feel, and what their concerns are, so that's going to be part of the driving force. So, hopefully I would love to have something ready for the board by June 30th. That's our target date, yes.
Do you have a number yet on how many surveys have returned, Dave?
I'm sorry, a number for what?
Do you know how many surveys have been returned to date so far?
Jenny might be able to answer that.
She's looking it up right now.
While she's looking.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think we have over a couple hundred responses. I know,
Last I heard
I think,
200.
we looked this afternoon, 86 of our teachers, 65 of our support staff. Last I checked, it was like over 250 parent responses, but it may be higher right now.
Good.
552.
Oh, we're up to 552. So thank you for those out there that are responding.
I haven't had a chance to look at the parent ones lately.
I think that's reasonable.
Yeah, that's great. Hopefully, how much longer do they have, Jenny, to respond?
We didn't set a deadline, I don't believe. I guess we probably need to close it.
They'll just trail off.
Yeah, typically,
Yeah.
yeah.
Please, for those out there, please get that in as soon as possible because we
can
are,
send another reminder.
that's great.
So
Dr. Hawkins.
my question, or my observation was, so if the plan is in place by the end of June, like you're planning, the plan takes no board action before our next regular meeting?
We would, that's where I was going. We're likely, I was wanting to know the time frame. We're likely gonna have to have some special meeting or meetings.
Okay,
I'm sure we'll have to have
Yeah.
some discussion.
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure.
all right, thanks.
Yeah, given the fact our next regular meeting's July 20th,
Yeah.
I don't think we wanna wait that long to give parents and our staff members certainty on where we're headed, so. We'll try to get that. Yes, Mrs. Ollie?
Just so you know, I don't know how the rest of the Zoom folks are doing, but, I can hear your voice pretty well, about 75% of what you say, but the other folks come across for me very garbled. Is that the way it is with you too, Kelly?
Yeah, I can't hear anybody but JP.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't even catch yours, so all the other comments and conversation,
Wow.
we're not hearing very well.
That's a lot of Zoom.
Well, thanks for the feedback, and if and when we do this again, we'll take that into consideration. All right, anything else before we adjourn? All right, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Make a motion.
Motion by Mr. Cool, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. West. Mrs. Ave,
Yay.
Mrs. Corrado.
Yay.
Yay. Mr. Cool.
Yay.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yay.
Mrs. Hill.
Okay.
Mr. West.
Yay.
And the chair votes yay. We stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, daughter, I wish you the best. Yeah. In
Thank
fact,
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
she pretty much